I'm a co-founder of Mind the Product, which is kind of what grew out of this product tank thing that we started. And also since then, co-founder of a tool called ProdPad, which is product management software. But I'm not going to be talking just about that because there's so many other tools that product managers need in their day-to-day lives. And I end up talking to all of them to figure out, what kind of processes do you have and how does your team work? And based on that, what kind of tools are going to fit best within that sort of thing? Now, the thing is that product managers are super, super busy people. I mean, at any point in time in the day, you guys are going to be doing one of these things, or maybe something else. I mean, honestly, it could stretch from the nitty-gritty of coming up with mock-ups and designing something and deciding how big or what the copy is going to look like on a button, through to coming up with new products or new big steps that the company should take to meet that product vision. And so therefore, you're not going to be able to find one tool that solves everything. The job is just too broad to even touch that sort of thing. So we're going to take a look at wide different range of different processes and tools along the way. What I've attempted to do here is sum up product management in a nutshell. And this is super, super, super simplified. And there's so many different pieces in here that are missing. But I mean, the concept is that you've got this company vision. Your company wants to be the X of Y. And in terms of objectives, Lisa just sort of mentioned, Telenor is going to have these millions of users, or probably already does, and they want to grow by X, and they've got these big objectives that the company is saying, this is where we are, or this is where we want to be. Now that's, following that's just top-down product management. You can't just say, we want to be the X of Y and have 1 million users. We were talking about this just beforehand. You can't just set these big, lofty goals and hope that the product gets there, because that's just going to mean that you're going to ignore what's happening with the customers or what changes in the market are going to happen or what else happens along the way. Now, on the flip side, you probably also have, either millions of users or even just tens of users, but they all want something. They've got feedback, your team wants to see you do something, they've got suggestions and requests and all this stuff. Now, you can't just do bottom-up product management. You can't just simply take all those feature requests and stack them in an order and go build them, because then you have a whole pile of features, and a whole pile of features does not make a good product most of the time. I'm seeing some people going, yeah, I know, my product does that too. And so product management essentially is like this blend of this top-down approach and this bottom-up approach, and it's the product manager's job to sit in the middle and to make that gut call, to make that decision as to, how much are you aiming towards this vision and taking a big step towards something, and how much are you actually just reacting to changes in the market and what people are asking for. And this is why I've always said that product managers are not going to get replaced anytime soon, because it does take a human with common sense in the middle to make those decisions. And along the way, there are tools and ways that you can make your lives easier, but at the same time, there's no way that it's just going to do the job for you. And from there, you've got all this input coming in. You might have your team inputting a whole bunch of ideas saying, oh, if we're going to be the X of Y, then we should definitely consider doing this. And you might have customers saying, hey, I saw this thing that you launched, but it would be really useful if it had this feature too. Or, hey, does it work like this? Can it work like this? So you've got team input coming in to your product backlog, and customer feedback and suggestions and requests and all this other stuff coming into your product backlog, all the stuff you could do. And one thing I've actually really done here is I've separated out this concept of a product backlog and a development backlog. A lot of times when people say the word backlog, they're talking about both, and it's this mishmash of stuff to be done. The product backlog, to me, Marty Kagan called it the opportunity backlog. It's the stuff that you could do, all these opportunities that you might want to touch on. Whereas the development backlog, I keep this separate, because the development backlog is all the stuff that you are going to do. It's just a matter of getting the right resource and the right time to put it together, whether that's using Scrum or Agile or whatever sort of process that goes along the way. These should be concrete, broken down, ready to go tickets, dev tasks and finished specs and bugs, anything like that. Whereas this might be anything from, hey, we should make this more blue, or add a button here, little tiny ideas like that, through to, hey, there's a potential new market we could tackle if we just did this to the product. Some really nebulous, big concepts in the backlog. And that's okay. The backlog is meant to be this big, fuzzy place with all this stuff that you could do, whereas the dev backlog feels and looks much different. It's just this discrete set of tasks to be done. In the middle is the roadmap, which actually just helps you. It does a couple things. The first and foremost, though, the roadmap is meant to communicate the vision and the steps you're going to take to meet that vision along the way. It's not a plan, it's not a promise. It's basically a way of saying that if we want to be the X of Y, then these are the big things we're going to tackle along the way. So I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit, but this is more or less how the core part of product management happens. Now, there's so much else that's happening along the side. There's experimentation, and there's research, and there's design, and there's all these other pieces that go in to creating that product backlog and informing that roadmap and checking that what's on the roadmap and what's in your backlog are actually the right things to do, or even testing your final launched product, which usually doesn't come out just nice and clean in a box like that, but you kind of get the idea. Now, in terms of how this looks in terms of your stack of products, your tools. Have you guys all heard the concept of a tech stack? If somebody says, what's your tech stack? You might be like, oh yeah, well we build it on SQL, and we've got a JavaScript, jQuery front end or whatever else. I like to think about your set of processes and tools that go with it as a tool stack or a product stack. And everyone's is going to be different. I mean, for example, just overlaying that set of processes, think of each of these circles as a different product that might cover these areas. You might have one product that covers and helps with your vision and objectives. You might have another product that does your product backlog, and another one that does your feedback management, another one that does your roadmap and your dev backlog all at the same time. That might work for you. Somebody else's might look completely different and have a different set of tools. Somebody else's might look different altogether again. And this is because there's no because the whole thing is very cyclical, and there's not necessarily these defined boundaries as to when one part of your job starts and the other part finishes. What you end up with is a set of tools based on what existed in the past. What kind of tools did you adopt? What kind of tools existed when you started building this product, or what have you integrated? Sometimes these might be proprietary tools. Sometimes there might be a process like a pen and paper or some Post-its you have stuck on the wall. That's okay, but everyone's is going to look different. Now, the goal of this is to hopefully make it so that all of these tools can work together and make your life easier. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. I mean, you've got the sweet spot. You should have some overlap. There should be some ways that these tools work together, so you're not constantly copying one from one place and putting it in another. And that integration could be as simple as moving it from one board to the next. If you're a micro startup and you can get away with whiteboards and Post-it notes, that works. In other cases, it might be that you've got an integration set up so that when you press a button in one tool, something else happens in the other. Ideally, there's not too much overlap, though. You don't want a tool that does two things at the same time, because then all of a sudden somebody says, in this case, where do I put feedback and suggestions? Do I put it in this tool, or do I put it in this tool? Where do I find the official version of this? And it just gets really confusing for people. So you don't want too much overlap. You want something that's usable. I'm sorry, but so many tools out there just suck. We know this. We know that there's so many tools out there that were built a decade ago and have just been sort of hacked apart to make it do something, or is kind of a half-completed beta that never actually did the integration that you hoped it would. There's so many different reasons that the tools just aren't friendly to people. And you also want something that's affordable. And affordable is a relative term. If you're a startup, then affordable might mean sub £100 a month, €100 a month, or I don't know. I'm not even going to work out what that is in kroner. Sorry, guys, I just got here. But a tool that's made for an enterprise, for example, will end up doing way too much and end up just making it impossible to even access for a startup. You look at tools like, I've looked at Salesforce in the past and realized, yeah, it has a lot of functionality, but at the same time, I'm going to use about this much of the whole thing, and I'm still to pay several £100s a month for this thing, and that's just not fair. So you need the right set of tools that actually does make something affordable. And this stuff does really add up. When we started running ProdPad, we were paying, $50 for a server each month, and maybe a total of like $100 on different tools. Trello is free and Jira is mostly free, and all these other tools kind of add up. Nowadays, it's actually one of our biggest expenditures because we've just got, you need a license for every last person in the team, and the original version no longer works. You need it to do the extra integrations or the extra functionality here or expand to fit your business. And so it's a relative term, but you do want a set that actually adds up to being something that makes sense to your company. And something that's fitted to your company. There's tons of reasons why two companies might have completely different setups and both might actually work. A lot of times, when you come into a company, you not only adopt the product that your company was working on, you adopt its X processes. What kind of tools they were using and what kind of training they've had in the past. Tools change, and it's actually harder to change a tool once it's been embedded, so you end up being stuck with something that may or may not be the right one, but works for your particular team. And also, when you're picking a new tool, you need to consider, if you've got a setup like this, and you need a tool to do your roadmap, for example, because that one's not there, then you don't need something that does everything. You just need something that does that one specific piece, for example. So everyone's breakup is going to be different. Now, the reality of it is that so many of these tools don't have the right integrations. We're kind of in this awkward phase right now where companies are realizing that they need to have an API and trying to build out these integration points, but a lot of them are kind of just half-assed. You see something, it's like, yeah, it kind of integrates, except it doesn't sync back and it doesn't do X, or it only integrates with this tool, but really by integration they mean an export. There's so many examples of that where you think, oh yeah, it totally works together, and then it doesn't quite work. A lot of times you're going to find something with all these redundant bits and pieces. I'm sitting here going, I'm using a tool called Drip right now, and it does a bunch of things. It could replace my MailChimp, but not quite as well. It doesn't quite do that as well as other bits that MailChimp already does for us, so I use it for this one little slice of it. But it's the best tool at that. It's not ideal because I'm paying for a whole tool and I use this much of it, but that's the best that I've got. I can't just take that one piece and pay them only for that. As I said, some of these tools can be really hard to use and take a lot of training. They haven't really thought about all the different users who are going to be involved in it. And you end up paying through the nose for these tools that scale. Sometimes they scale based on how many people on your team. Sometimes they scale based on how much you're using it. Sometimes it scales based on transactions, if you're using something for payment processing and things like that. And just so many of these things are just hacked together to try to make that right fit, and it can be very difficult to find that perfect match. Truth is, no one has a perfect setup. There is no perfect, I've talked to now hundreds, maybe thousands of product managers, and everyone says, oh, it's really great, except I don't like this part, or I really wish I found a solution for this. Here's a question. Why do so many product managers hate Jira? Jira is not a bad product. As a matter of fact, in terms of how a product goes, it's actually a great product. It's got great functionality. It is easy to use compared to a lot of other stuff out there. It does a lot, and it's a very reasonable price. It goes down to free for some people. But that said, it's like using a hammer to get it screwed in. A lot of people end up using Jira for things that it's not meant for. More often than not, I'm seeing it used. It's a great development backlog tool, but it's not a great product backlog tool. And so if you try to make something do both of them, you end up with unhappy dev backlog that has way too much stuff in there. Every Jira backlog seems to have a ticket that says, make it more mobile. Everyone's like, what does that even mean, right? Your developers feel really, shafted by this because they look at it and they're going, hey, you guys did 50 things this week, good job, great burn down chart, except it's on a base of 500. And if you've got a base of 500, then they're going to go through that list and go, well, I can't do that one, I can't do that one, I can't do that one. I'm just going to not touch this. Ideally, your dev backlog should only include actionable ready-to-go tickets that are approved, to the point that, rule of thumb, any dev in your team can pick up a ticket blindly, work on it, and know that they're more or less working on the right thing. They should be able to pick that out of your dev backlog. If you've got a tool that is both your product backlog and your dev backlog in the same go, then they're not going to have that distinction. It makes it very, very difficult to use. And that's just one example. I don't mean to unfairly pick on Jira. We use Jira. If set up properly, it can be a joy to use, and it can really, really help your team move forward with things. But it's, easy one to pick on because it's classically a hammer for a screwdriver or a screwdriver type job. So I'm just going to go through and show you what's in our toolkit. We're just one of these companies, but because I spend so much time talking and thinking about tools and changing our tools and trying to figure out what the best mix is, I've got lots of experience in seeing what works, what doesn't work, and happy to share my own experience in how these different pieces work. So let's have a look. We've got design and prototyping tools, and I started here because this is probably an area that has so many different options out there. My favorite tool, I don't go anywhere without this, dot grid book. Like a lined notebook, except it's got grid, little dots, simply because I can't draw squares to save my life. And just something like this allows me to just sketch things out and, draw squares within squares, and that's my mock-up. A lot of times, this is as far as I go. I'll take a picture of this, send it around to my team, and go, that's a good first version. Nothing is going to replace this. The thing that's come closest to replacing it for me is a tool called Mockups with a Q. Now, I say I'm using Mockups. To be honest, there are so many other tools out there. Sketch, Marvel, Balsamic is the popular one. UXPin is another one that I've been seeing come out. So many of these different tools, but basically just a way of digitizing a low-fi through to hi-fi and maybe some interactivity with that wireframe. And they go all the way from essentially a digital copy of a napkin drawing all the way through to an almost usable version of the app, clickable prototype that, has the drop downs and this, that, and the other. I find mockups is just nice in the middle there. I use things like Photoshop, mostly for just like the fine-grained, setting the colors right and setting the fonts and making sure that a piece of it looks and represents what the final design is going to look like. And I use Chrome a lot to do HTML and CSS prototyping. Like I'll just do inspect element and go, it's just a small change. Why don't I just, show you how the interactive might work, or show you what this button might look like if I just changed and tweaked it a little bit there within the app itself. And these are just really, really simple tools. There's so many out there, and your tool stack will change depending on how big your team is and that sort of thing. Right now, we don't actually have a dedicated designer. We have one starting on Monday, which is going to be great, and I'll be learning about all new tools that are out there. But this is just a great sort of product manager's essential kit to get you started with doing design stuff. I've kind of grouped together customer success and support things. We swear by Zendesk as our support tool. And what we've actually set it up to do is that whenever somebody comes in and says they've got feedback, for example, we can take that and pull it directly from Zendesk and pull it directly into our feedback backlog in ProdPad. Anytime somebody reports a bug, we can just, with one click, press a button and it takes that bug and reports it directly to our Jira. So it actually connects and overlaps really, really well with the tools that we already use, which is part of the reason it makes it valuable. It is one of those tools that has like a billion pieces of functionality, so it is, it gives you enough rope that you can hang yourself with, but if set up right, it can be a great tool. Other ones to look at, the likes of Intercom and Drift are becoming really popular these days. Lighter weight and just more about this whole have a chat with your customer and let them report stuff as it comes through. They don't have all the integrations in place, but it depends on, what your tolerance is for copy pasting sometimes. We also use a tool called App Queues, which we use for hotspots. When somebody comes in and it says like, oh, you're welcome to ProdPad, and it pops up this little glowing dot that you can click on and it'll tell you this is what this button does and this is why this page exists. We also use it for in-app messaging, which I'll show you in a second as well. Up until recently, we used a tool called Frontleaf. It was kind of expensive for what it did and didn't quite solve all our problems, but it was a great concept, which is around, of all the customers in our database, based on everything they're doing, tell me which of these customers are most likely to be successful, which of them are most likely to churn, which of them are, I should call and see if they want to upgrade because they're kind of busting their limits. It touched on some of those pieces, but we ended up having to take some of that back in-house. And that's kind of the reality, is a lot of times when you get to a certain point, you'll end up building some of this stuff in-house because you'll have a tool that you're paying X for each month and realize, actually, if we just built our own thing, we could get more out of it and just solves this one particular problem that we have. Don't get me wrong, it is a great tool. I think it just isn't quite right for a company of our size. Other ones to look at in that area, Tatango and Preact are kind of the popular ones there. They're kind of classic customer success tools as they're billing themselves as. We also have another tool, I mentioned this before, Drip. This one I absolutely love because it allows us to, it's actually basically this project we did. You can't really see this, and I've made it too small anyways. This is all the emails you get in the first 2 days of joining. Now, you don't get all of them when you join ProdPad. What we've actually done is created this way of doing like a persona-specific onboarding thing. And this came out of the whole thing of like, whenever somebody joins up to an app, almost every time you get this email like, hi, welcome to so-and-so app. And regardless of whether you actually used the app in the first 5 minutes or whether you didn't use that app in the first 5 minutes, you get a follow-up email and another one, and it's like, hey, your trial's about to expire on this app you never used. But they don't say that. They just kind of have this blind set of emails. And that's what we had up until a couple months ago. And we realized, well, why do we have, some of our users will sign up and they do nothing in the app. They'll click around, and then they close the tab, and we never hear from them again. Other people will come in and do everything. They're just like, oh yeah, I want to add an idea, and start an integration, and do this and the other. So why are we sending them an email the next day saying, did you know you can add ideas to ProdPad? It just was ineffective. So what we actually did, user joins up at the top there. We wait 5 minutes. Let's see what he does. Okay, has he added an idea yet? If no, then do this. If yes, then do this. If he's added some feedback, then do this. We have different personas. So we have Silent Sean, who does nothing at all. If he does nothing, we send him an email. It's like, that was weird. You came on for like 30 seconds and then left. What happened? Talk to us. And the amount of people who reply to that is amazing. We get a lot of fresh re-engagement based on that. For the person, we call her Super Sally. She does everything. There's no point telling her she can add ideas. She's already like gung-ho. So let's give her an email and tell her, hey, there's like some really cool stuff you can do. Here's like a secret tip just for you. And then we've got a whole spread of emails in between. This is all average Joe here. If you've done a bit of this, but not this, then we should tell you about this thing. If you've done a bit of this, but not that one, then we should tell you about that one. The results of doing this, and this is again just the first 5 minutes, we've been able to see activity just shoot up in their first, core days and minutes of their usage, and our conversion rate shoot up as a result. So a tool like this can actually really help you do this. Originally, we tried to spec this out using MailChimp. It was like using a hammer for a screwdriver job, because we realized the only way to visualize the whole flow and to put it all together was with a tool that actually did that. So that's a great tool that we've been using that's in our kit. The other one I mentioned was one called App Queues that we use for release notes and just sending the stuff out. A lot of companies will do this manually and like create something within their app. Nowadays, there's much better ways of just sort of like creating these messages, pushing it out from a web app, and it just appears in your app itself. We call this one the Taco. You guys use Trello? Trello has that little dog that pops up in the corner, and Trello calls it Taco. Well, App Queues basically, they call their feature Taco, which I'm not sure is kosher, I don't know. But basically, we've integrated directly within our app. So this is in our app itself. And so therefore, whenever we push messages, we can choose, does it pop up on the screen, as in, here's a brand new release that you should reload the page for, versus, hey, do you have time for a quick question, or, let's just start a conversation or ask you a question about something. It's a really useful tool that's just helped wipe out our need to do too much in the way of integration or do too much in the way of manually creating these messages or emailing them every time something happens. So that's the other piece that's in our customer success toolkit. In terms of analytics, we use Google Analytics. If anybody here isn't using it, it's kind of like an obvious choice. It does everything and is absolutely free, so there's always that. We're actually in the middle of changing out some of our tools right now. So I mentioned this front leaf one. We're moving away from that and seeing what we can build with the likes of Keen.io and Amplitude are at the top of our list right now. But these are kind of looking in the area of product analytics. So what is happening within your app? Whereas Google Analytics is great for what's happening within your website. People came on your site and they looked at this page and they looked at the pricing page and then they signed up. That's great, but what happened after they signed up? And right now, a lot of that stuff we're doing in-house, and we're looking for tools to actually solve that problem. So if anybody actually is using a tool like that, let me know, because I could use advice on this one. But it's a new space. It's really, really heating up right now, so I think we're going to see a lot more out of that. And the other one we use is ChartMogul. And this is one of those few apps where I signed up, and within minutes I was like, take my money. Because it just solved a problem. I run a SaaS company, and I'm always wondering, what's our monthly recurring revenue, and what's our churn rate, and how many companies in Norway are paying us money, and how many companies in America are paying us money, and how much? Which types of customers are worth the most. Really, really hard to dig that out of your billing system, and this one just solved it, gave me all my back data on it, and I was like, this is magic, just take my money. So anybody using SaaS, building a SaaS tool, should have something like this set up. Other ones out there, we've tried Mixpanel in the past, but kind of outgrew it and ended up building something in-house. Looker looks amazing, but is too big for us. And everything else is kind of in the middle there, just different ways of cutting up data and analytics within your app itself. So some really cool tools out there. Right now, it's still kind of a new space, so we'll see what kind of falls out of it in the next 6 months or a couple years from now. Now, let's talk about the kind of like core product itself. Now, this is something, obviously, we dog food. We build a product tool, so this is, kind of encapsulates our product process itself. But it does touch on everything from gathering ideas and feedback from customers, managing a portfolio. You might have one product or you might have multiple products. Road mapping, so actually saying, this is where we are now, and these are the steps we want to take along the way, through to actually creating those specs so that the developers know what they're working on. So I'll show you how we use ProdPad for that, but also I can tell you about where, what the analog versions are of these. A lot of these things that we've built were based on Post-it notes that I used to do, and was like, why isn't there a tool for this? A little bit of background about ProdPad. It was built by myself and my co-founder, who's actually also one of the co-founders of ProductCamp. And one day we were just lamenting about the fact that there were no tools to fill this gap. And I had this idea. I'd been kind of speccing something out, doing some mock-ups, but I didn't know how to do back-end code. I can only do like front-end, make it look pretty code, as opposed to back-end, make it actually work. And my co-founder said to me, well, that's easy. I could build the back-end. It's like, great. So we started like this little hack weekend project, thinking, it'll be done, it'll be easy. We used it internally only within our own teams for 2 years, the first year of which it didn't even have a name. It was just the tool we used to do our jobs. Eventually, we started creating like a little mini website around it saying, ProdPad, product management software, buy now. And people started clicking the button. So I was like, this is great. So I quit my job. He quit his job within a few months, and we've been working on it since we launched it in 2013, and it's been growing since. But originally, it was just a tool we use internally to solve our own problem, and kind of grew from there. All right, so in terms of idea gathering, a couple tips here. Wherever you're gathering ideas, whether it's in Jira or whether it's a spreadsheet or wherever else that you want to put your ideas, just make sure that it's super, super simple for your team. It's to the point that, when you add an idea in ProdPad, you don't have to be logged in. You can just use the Chrome extension, or you can email it in, or you can add it via Slack, tools like that. You don't have to give it a title, because honestly, people suck at making titles, and if you ask them to stop and come up with a name for their idea, their suggestion, they're going to come up with something, and it's going to suck, and you're going to end up renaming it anyways. And it also just slows them down, that fractional amount. And if it slows them down, then they're going to get sick of spending that extra little time each time they go to add an idea. And if that happens, then they're going to just stop telling you about their ideas. They're going to go, oh, it's just too much effort to bother telling so-and-so about this. So, you know what, I'll get to it later. Whereas if you make it so easy, so frictionless that they can just do it wherever they're already chatting, it makes a huge difference. Accept any idea, big ideas, small ideas. Don't tell somebody, oh, well, that's too big, or that's definitely not in our remit, so, don't bother telling me about that stuff. Or don't tell them, that's just a little tiny UX thing. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point in time. You want to hear these things, and oftentimes you'll hear them over and over and over again before you actually start fixing them. But if people start feeling like, oh, I'm not quite sure what I'm allowed or what I'm supposed to tell you about, then they're just going to stop telling you, and you start missing out on some of the potential innovation. There's ideas that might be flying by, big ones or small ones, that get lost in the in the rush of different things that your company could be working on. And very importantly, don't allow your backlog to become this black hole. So many people say, well, we use Jira, or we use a spreadsheet, or we use something else. And the biggest problem is that people don't trust it. People think this is where their ideas go to die. I have the ideas, they're safe. Except they're in a spreadsheet that, you might have it shared on Google Drive, but your team isn't going to look at that. It might be in Jira or something like that, but do you think your sales team is going to go through Jira, find out if that idea exists, and then go, oh, maybe I should add something now? No, they're just not going to tell you. They're also going to think that you're not doing their job, and that, ideas are just sort of like left to die. The reality is that if somebody adds an idea, if somebody comes to me saying, I really like this thing, I really think we should do this, I wish I could spend half an hour with each person saying, that's interesting, let's sit down, tell me about it, what would it look like, and where have you seen this in the past, and what problem are you trying to solve, and have you seen a competitor do this, or is this something that a customer suggested? You wish you could give every last idea that kind of attention, but you can't, not right then and there. You can't drop everything. You also can't just deliver on something a week later saying, that's a good idea, let's go build it now. Reality is that you've got 3 or 4 sprints planned ahead. That's 2 months ahead. So by the time that you're actually getting around to building their stuff, unless it was something like ridiculously brilliant, chances are it's several months later that they're actually seeing it being built. And if they can't actually see where it's gone in the meantime, again, what's the point? They keep telling you all this stuff and you keep not doing it. What does product management even do? And that's what the sales team and the support team and the marketing team and every other team thinks product management is doing, unless you can actually show a way to say, you know what, your backlog is a safe place where ideas go to get nurtured and turned into stuff. So I actually recommend, this is actually from the ProdPad dashboard here. You can't really see it, but it kind of flags up how many ideas are new that might need your attention, or how many ideas might be quick wins, or how many ideas haven't been updated in a long time or don't have enough detail to go forward to dev. So you can go through and do stuff like that, and it'll flag them up. And I call this Friday afternoon brain dead time. There's been 28 ideas that haven't been updated recently. Just click triage. Takes you to the first idea in that list. Okay, why has this idea not been updated in a month's time or 6 months' time? Oh, because you know what, it's no longer relevant. Or actually, we did do it and I should close it out. Or actually, I had some questions about this that I didn't have time to ask at that time, so maybe I should jump in and add more detail to it now, or ask a question about it, or figure out what they actually meant by this. And this is just the type of thing that if you do on a weekly basis or even just monthly basis, it makes sure that you look at every idea at least once a month, acknowledge its existence, and hopefully do something with it. Even just add a tag or draw a napkin sketch, take a picture and go, I think this is what it looks like. Maybe I'll come back on Monday and do a prettier version. So just making sure that your backlog doesn't become a black hole. It is a challenge. It is kind of one of these jobs that everyone goes, oh, I don't really want to do my backlog. But it does just help you keep on top of things. Prioritization is also a really finicky one. I've talked to so many people who will say things like, oh, I really want to be able to stack rank my ideas and say, this idea is worth 50 out of 100 for revenue and 30 out of 100 for risk, and it's got a multiplier of X on the Y axis. And you're sitting here going, great, so you did all that, you came up with this algorithm, you pressed a button and it told you, these are the top ideas you should work on. And you look at them and you go, well, actually, I should do number 8 first because the CEO says so, or because the conference is next week, or if I don't, then this client's going to leave. There's always something that isn't factored into an algorithm, so don't try to just delegate your job to an algorithm. What I prefer to do is actually kind of say, here's all the ideas in your backlog. We're going to help you pick out which ones might be the most valuable to work on. So you can do things like, find me all the ideas that are revenue generating, that are not yet on the backlog, and that are new, I haven't looked at yet, and that haven't been updated in a long time. Find me those ideas. And as you click and filter through, it'll actually show you where they sit. So this is an axis of impact versus effort. Up in this corner, you've got quick wins. Down in this corner, you've got time sinks. Right away, I can say, oh, I've got 3 ideas that are quick wins, revenue generating, and not yet on the roadmap. Why don't I put these on the roadmap if we're aiming for revenue, if that's our big thing that we're going for? So instead of trying to say these are the top 5 things to work on, actually giving you guys the ability to just dig through and understand what's in there, as opposed to trying to replace you with an algorithm, which frankly is not going to happen anytime soon. Now road mapping is a really contentious one. How many people here have like a timeline or Gantt chart style roadmap? Okay, a few people. That row. The problem with something like that is that you end up with, you might be able to say, this project is going to take 3 weeks, and therefore it's going to take up this much space on our timeline. This one, we think is about the same, so it should probably take up about the same. And this one should happen after that, and it's probably twice that. And then at the end of it, you end up saying, oh, and by Q4, we're going to have this. And I'm like, well, frankly, you don't know how big your team's going to be in Q4, let alone how fast you're going to be able to deliver. So take the dates off. Don't try to estimate how big something is, because you've guesstimated for that first one, and everything that's going on the back of that is just a bigger and bigger guesstimate. It's to the point where the things that are happening in the future, custom reports. What does that even mean? Right? Like, what kind of custom reports? This is just this common theme. You want to get there. It's part of your vision. You know that the big companies, if you're going to tackle that, then you're going to have to do custom reports of some sort. But it's not like you know what these things look like. You certainly haven't spec'd them out, and the dev team certainly has not agreed to how long it's going to take to deliver. So what we usually recommend is just take out the dates and go with something more theme-based. And the whole idea of a theme is that it's an initiative or a project or a problem that you want to solve at some point. And each of these cards that you see here is one of those themes. And all you're basically saying is, if we're going to be the X of Y, then these are, right now, we think the big problems we need to solve along the way. Big boulders. Now, the ones in the future might just be one-liners, custom reports, and that's it. Whereas the stuff that's in the current term, you might have a lot more detail. You might be able to say, by the search and listing pages, we mean that we're going to tackle this, 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 and this, and in this order, more or less. So you will have different levels of granularity, but just by breaking it down and saying, these are the big problems we want to solve, what you can then do with this is it allows you to get a better conversation going around what it is you're trying to do. If you had a timeline version, you certainly wouldn't want to show it to your customers and say, hey, this is what we're going to be delivering, because they're going to say, oh, great, so in 6 months' time, you're going to have this feature I wanted. You're like, well, maybe. I don't really want to promise that, but it does say, the line finishes there. If you don't have it, then you're in trouble. Whereas with this, you're saying, okay, you really want digest emails, better digest emails. I get that, but look at all the other cool stuff we want to do first. Is this the right order for you? Does this make sense? Is there anything on here that's missing? And right then and there, you might have them say, oh, yeah, make sure that when you're doing the homepage redesign, that it does this, or make sure that when you do single sign-on, that you include Google Apps as well, or whatever other kind of functionality. Doesn't mean that you're saying, yes, I'll just put that in, but you're gathering feedback that goes back into your feedback backlog. Here's all the stuff that your customers are asking for, and here's the stuff that it could affect your roadmap. So this is the way that we do road mapping at ProdPad, and because we do it this way, we actually managed to create a public version of our roadmap. If you go to our website, we will publish a version and put it out there directly on our site so people can see where it is we're going. We're sitting here going, yeah, sure, the competitors can see it, but honestly, there's nothing in there that they're going to be able to steal. It's not like I've given them the blueprint on how to do this. But more often than not, it opens up the conversations so that people say, yeah, this is the right thing to work on, or no, I don't think this is important to us. I think this is more important. And just allows us to make sure that we're constantly building not just what this vision is, we want to be the X of Y and have this many users, but they're actually saying, no, the real problems I have is this. And we can go, oh, wow, there's an even bigger problem to solve here. Let's get that in the roadmap and actually build something that's of value now and 5 years from now. And in terms of speccing, a lot of people come to ProdPad because they think that they come in because they're like, oh, I really want to do a roadmap, right? My roadmap's due in a week's time and I should probably start getting something in there. Reality of it is, though, product managers, most of their day, they end up doing idea management and feedback management, gathering ideas and getting them on Post-it notes and making sure that they're not lost, and speccing them out, taking a napkin drawing they've done and turning it into something that's more detailed and is ready for the developers. This is honestly where people end up spending their day-to-day lives. And so what we generally recommend doing is breaking it down to the right level of detail. And that's going to differ for your team. If you've got a developer who sits next to you, then chances are you can say, yeah, we just need to add a button here. put it in a quick little ticket, send it over to him, and he goes to build it. Simple. Other times it might be that you've got an external team who lives in a completely different country and is several weeks behind in terms of development. So by the time that they get around to doing it, you're already focusing on other stuff. In those cases, you're going to need more detail. I can't tell you the right amount of detail to add, but at the very least, I always recommend giving it a description, just a paragraph or two to describe what it is you're trying to do. Giving it a business case. And a lot of people in your team are going to kind of get scared by the idea of, what's a business case? But honestly, it's just answering two questions. What problem are you trying to solve? And what value would it provide to the company if you did solve it? And you can ask this of anybody in your team, the sales guy who says, oh, we really need to do X. Well, that's nice that you really need to do X. I know the problem you want to solve is that you want to solve, your commission. You want to sell it. But honestly, what problem are you solving for the customer? And they can say, oh, well, it's going to do this, and this is why it's really important to him, and this is why I'm selling it to him. Great. Based on that, you've made yourself a business case. You do that, and you're going to get more money out of it. That's a great, simple business case. And what you're basically doing is making sure that you're capturing that context. Too often, and I feel bad for developers when this happens, is, they're sitting in Jira and a ticket comes in and it says do X, Y, and Z. And they're like, well, why? Developers aren't just code monkeys to build whatever. They want to know, is this being done because a lot of customers have asked for it, or because it's doing this, or because it's doing that? And also giving them that context, they can often find their own better way of solving that problem. You might say in the ticket, oh, well, it's got to be able to do this, this, and this. And they say, well, if the problem is to solve this, then I found a better way of doing it. This is a great chance for me to use this new library or this new tech. Or I'm, smarter than you. I might know a better way of doing this. And so it gives them that way of giving them that context and trusting them with that so that they can actually find their best way of delivering it. Now, you can break things down into user stories. Who uses user stories? Cool, that half of the room. Anybody using the new jobs to be done? Okay, all right, so there's like a new format of doing user stories which is focused on the problem that you're solving for that particular customer. Honestly, I don't care which ones you guys use. Everyone will get really tied up in, oh, this is the right way of doing it, this is the best way of doing it. But honestly, it's about breaking something down into tangible pieces that says, this user wants to be able to do this thing, we know it's working when they can do X. And all of the different ways of breaking it down, as long as you're using human readable terms that your developers agree on, it makes sense. I also recommend setting like a very high level impact and effort for all your ideas. And this isn't trying to measure dollars or days. What you're trying to do is just try to give a gut feel. When somebody comes to you saying, hey, I think we should do X, oftentimes you're sitting here going like, that sounds really hard to do. Gut feel, as a product manager, oftentimes if you gave it a number out of 100, you wouldn't be far off, right? Relatively speaking, you could say this idea is going to be harder to make and this one's going to be easier to make. Same thing goes with in terms of impact. You're like, oh, actually that sounds like a great idea. If we did that, yeah, I could really see how that's going to boost our numbers. I think it's worth trying. Whereas other things, you're like, I really don't see why this is going to be important. So it gives you that ability to just give that high level impact and effort. And if you do something like that, then it allows you to see your ideas in sort of this grid view of saying, well, up here, relatively speaking, quick wins, and these are our big projects, and these are our time sinks that we shouldn't spend our time on. All right, so other tools that we use, I grouped this under sanity, because this is just stuff that I use on a day-to-day basis, and I wouldn't leave, whenever I get a new laptop, the first thing I do is just make sure I've got the following tools installed and ready to go. Dropbox and Google Drive, we've got different purposes for them, but both are useful in their own way. I'm sure you guys are probably using something similar to it, or those tools themselves. I use Chrome. I prefer its extensions and all the stuff you can do with it, the inspect elements, so you can actually take apart web pages and change them on the fly. Who uses Slack in here? Excellent, everybody. All right, so Slack is like my new favorite thing. I've done some really cool stuff with it, with hooking it up with every Trello board we have, or with ProdPad itself. Somebody types #idea in ProdPad, it logs it as an idea. They don't have to go find ProdPad and log in. If I star a message in Trello, it turns it into a to-do for me. If I star a message in Slack, it turns it into to-do for me in my Trello board. Every time a code build fails or passes, it tells our dev team in their DevOps channel. So many different ways that we use this just to keep our lives sane. We even have our own internal bots. We've created little bots that come in every morning and tell us this is how many people signed up yesterday, and this is how many people added ideas yesterday. So you can keep a running total of these things and not have to go check other external dashboards for this stuff. We even use it for our daily stand-up. All of our team is remote. We're 6 people in 4 different cities right now. So it means that instead of doing like a stand-up in front of each other, we're also in different time zones. So it means that we just write #daily stand-up, write what we did yesterday, what we did today, and keeps us on the same page with everything. It's not as formal as some people do it, but it just saves our life. I'm loving Cloud App lately. It's one of those little ones, little keyboard shortcut. So I just press like Control-5, and it allows me to select an area, and it takes a screenshot of that, creates a link out of it, so I just then paste that link to somebody in Slack or whatever else. The amount of times that I take screenshots, I'm just like, I'll just do this here. And you can annotate it, you can take little recordings of videos or make mini GIFs out of it. So much better if you can just say, this is the bug happening right now. Take a quick screen grab of it, send it to the devs, and they just get it right then and there. So I use this thing for everything. I'm really, really, really careful about security, so I live on LastPass. Also super useful if you've got a bunch of test accounts. Like I have dozens of different ProdPad accounts, obviously because I'm testing my thing, and I need to log in and out of them all the time. So it means that I've just got ways of like having all my passwords in one place, click a button and I'm logged in as Sue or Charlotte or Joe or whoever I want to be that day, or my bank if I need to get into that as well. Anybody here know of Zapier? Okay, anybody know about if this then that? Okay, a few extra people. Zapier is like if this then that for business. So instead of hooking up your weather app to your Twitter, it's things like hook my MailChimp up to my CRM, or hook my Slack up to my Trello board, or hook my ProdPad up to whatever other tool. So based on that, we've got dozens of different integrations, so many different ways. I use it for a lot of things that I do with ProdPad, but I also just use it for so many of my other like automation pieces. You know, if somebody signs up, then have it send me an email, for example. We're using Zapier. And I use Trello. It's pretty much like the go-to Trello task manager board. I didn't actually add anything for like task and dev management stuff in here because there are, you guys know, like there's literally thousands of them out there. I've happened to stick with this one, and we could wax lyrical on what the best one is. There isn't. Again, it's just, I could go back to that sort of thing. Where does it fit within your process? You know, which one suits your team the best? And then there's the fallbacks. Like, you know what, our biggest competitor, ProdPad, is still an Excel spreadsheet, or a whiteboard, or a Post-it note, or things like this. You know, this is the stuff that every product manager uses, so I couldn't say, like, the product management toolkit is all these different tech stuff, when honestly, it's a Sharpie. And don't forget offline exercises. You know, being a product manager is not about having all these tools that hook everything up. You still have to have those conversations and collaborate with your team and work with them. One of my favorite exercises is called the product tree game. And it is a game. You basically get a big printout of a tree. Actually, I've got an example of it here. You get a big printout of a tree, or stick one on the whiteboard, and you call the trunk. That's your core features. The roots are the infrastructure, the branches are the directions the product could go, and the leaves are the features. And you get different people from your team. You get the sales guy, and the marketing person, and the support person, and a developer, and you give them a whole bunch of Post-it notes. You can even get leaf-shaped ones, which is really fun, but they write down the features they want to see, and then they start putting it on the tree and saying, you know, this is what I think should happen in the near term, really close to the trunk. This should happen first. And this is what should happen after that. And this is some cool idea in the future. Let's put that in the edges. And just by doing something like this, getting them away from their computer, away from all the tools that you're using, just get them to do this on paper, you've basically created yourself a prototype roadmap. Right? They're basically saying, this is the way I want to see the roadmap grow. And so based on that, you can take that, transcribe it into a digital version or into a final roadmap, and you've already got their buy-in because they actually helped make it. So don't forget offline exercises like that. If you guys like, I actually have this, it's this little handy guide for product people. Nothing to do with tools per se, it has to do with just exercises, offline and online, that you can do with your team to tease out the vision and the roadmap and how to do personas or how to do testing, that kind of stuff. So I've got a few copies of this going around if anybody wants them. But don't forget the offline exercises and what your actual role is. I managed to jump back there. What does the future of product management tools look like? I've often thought about this. You know, right now, The best that tools can do is kind of half-hack together all the different pieces and hope that it all works together, but there's still going to be you in the middle doing that hard thinking, going, well, actually, should I do this or should I do that? In the future, I wonder if there's going to be tools that, based on everything that's in your backlog and based on all this feedback, does like natural language processing and actually tells you this is what your roadmap should look like. We actually wrote a blog post on April 1st, a couple of years back, saying we've solved this, the auto-magical roadmap. And the amount of people that wrote in saying, how do I use it? Like, it doesn't exist yet, guys, it's not real. But when you look at AI and these chatbots and all these things coming in, acting and feeling like humans, or not quite, but getting there, is this what the future of product management is going to be, is something that actually helps you do this stuff? I believe that the future of these tools are going to be that they're all connected much, much, much more deeply. I think we're just at the very beginning where you've got these separate tools. I think down the line it'll be a matter of, imagine you say, hey, you know what, I'm a product manager. I need to be able to do this, 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 and this. You fill out a little wizard, and then it just connects all these pieces, and they all just work together seamlessly, and you pay in one place, and it just sort of grows with your team as you go. That would be very cool. That does not exist yet, and I wish I could tell you this is the perfect setup. Maybe that's what product managers will be doing in 20 years' time. Anyways, happy to answer questions, happy to talk about your specific setups or give advice on different pieces that I've seen work and not work within product teams. But thanks very much, guys.